Thank you for joining us today for the ABA's Civil Rights and Social Justice Program, How Things Work, the Legal Edition, which is a rapid response project that addresses how our civil rights are being impacted by actions being taken by the new administration. My name is Leslie E. Redmond. I am an attorney. I'm the executive director for Win Back, a Minnesota-based nonprofit, and Don't Complain Activate. And I'm thrilled to welcome you all to this conversation. These videos are a unique opportunity to address what is happening in America today, clarify any misunderstanding or disinformation being spread, and how civil rights and social justice advocates can act to protect the rights of everyone. Today's topic, unpacking the Trump administration's attack on civil rights and racial justice, is more critical than ever. As we confront ongoing attempts to roll back progress, it's essential to examine how these issues intersect with the principles of justice and equity that guide the work of our section and the ABA in general. We are honored to have with us Nekima Levy Armstrong, civil rights attorney and social justice advocate and activist. Her expertise and dedication to the fight for racial justice has made her one of the leaders in this field, and we are grateful for her willingness to share her insights with us. And without further ado, let us dive right in. So, Donald Trump's second term in office has been marred by attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion across the federal government, academic institutions, corporate America, and K through 12 education. Nekima, can you please share with us some examples of the executive orders signed by Donald Trump that impacts diversity, equity, and inclusion, also known as DEI?
Yes, Leslie, thank you for hosting this conversation as well as the ABA section on civil rights and social justice. It's an honor to be here, and thank you all for tuning in. I want to start by saying if people feel as if their rights are under attack, you're absolutely right. There is so much that has happened since January 20th of 2025 that has caused a lot of panic, devastation, turmoil, and uncertainty. And unfortunately, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but it is important for us to understand what has been occurring and to find ways to use our voices to fight back. We cannot be silent in the midst of these attacks against our civil rights and our civil liberties. So, as you know, Donald Trump was sworn in as the 47th president on January 20th of 2025. That very same day, he started signing executive orders that have had a significant impact on our American society. I will start with Executive Order 14151, which eliminated all DEI, also known as diversity, equity, and inclusion related programs, offices, and staff positions across federal agencies. Agencies have to report and terminate any DEI related activities to the Office of Management and Budget. Donald Trump also signed Executive Order 14173, which revoked Executive Order 11246, removing affirmative action and anti-discrimination requirements for federal contractors. So if we look at the effects of these two executive orders that I referenced, it has essentially shaken up the federal government where people who are employed by the federal government have been put in the position of having to identify folks whose job titles or descriptions are focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And here's why diversity, equity, and inclusion is so important. As we know, there has been a great deal of discrimination and oppression that have been wielded against Black people and other people of color since before the founding of this country. So, in other words, we have never had a level playing field. And because of the way that a person looks, they have an accent, for example, they speak a different language, they have a disability, they identify as LGBTQIA, or they're a woman. Those are some of the categories of people that have been historically discriminated against. And so through diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's a way of leveling the playing field and ensuring that people get an equal opportunity when they apply for a job or when they push for a promotion within their current field of employment. And so within the federal government, Donald Trump's administration has decided to wage war against diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts by closing down offices that are focused on DEI, impacting various initiatives and programs and funding sources that are meant to help level the playing field within our society. So, in addition to those particular executive orders, we've also seen impacts to higher education because of the actions of the Trump administration. If anyone has been following the news, we have seen Donald Trump get into a confrontation with Columbia University, which is one of our most heralded academic institutions of higher learning. Donald Trump and his administration essentially put forward 9 different criteria that Columbia University had to adhere to in order to continue to receive federal funding. And I'll just give a couple of examples. One included Columbia University agreeing to a no mask policy, agreeing to not allow protests and demonstrations to happen on their campus, and doing away with diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives on campus. Now, unfortunately, Columbia University decided not to fight back, and they cowered to the Trump administration in the aftermath of them being threatened with losing their federal funding. They were threatened with losing over $400 million in federal funding. And because Donald Trump is taking our tax dollars and the power that we, the people, have instilled in the federal government and weaponizing it, we have one of our, again, most heralded academic institutions feeling forced to cower to the administration and adhere to these unreasonable demands. Now, on the other hand, we have seen Harvard University make the decision thus far to mostly fight back against the Trump administration. And I say mostly because initially they said that they would not agree to any of the demands from the Trump administration, which were very similar to the demands that were made to Columbia. And they actually decided to sue the Trump administration as a result of the demands that were placed upon them. And Harvard actually was threatened with losing over $2 billion in federal funding. That is an open and active situation. It's unclear what is going to happen at the end of the day, but most recently, Harvard backtracked a little bit from their strong stance by agreeing to change their Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion to something more general, like classrooms and climate or something of that nature, which doesn't have the same impact as proactively focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so this is an ongoing battle to have our nation's oldest university with the largest endowment, one of the most well-respected institutions of higher learning, doing battle with the Trump administration about these unreasonable demands. And it's almost as if Harvard is holding the line for the rest of the colleges and universities that are under threat from the Trump administration of losing federal funding or even their 501c3 designations, which he has thrown out as a threat against Harvard. So these are very serious attacks that are happening that are going to potentially impact higher education as we know it, as well as impact who gets the opportunity to attend a college or a university in the era of Trump's focus on dismantling the progress that has been made through diversity, equity, and inclusion and affirmative action. And here's another sad part about all of this. We have seen the courts play a role, particularly the Supreme Court, at times rubber stamping some of the unreasonable behaviors and demands of Donald Trump, which again makes institutions like Harvard potentially vulnerable to these attacks. And if Harvard is vulnerable, that means these other institutions will be vulnerable as well.
100%. Nekima, you took the words out of my mouth. I was just thinking, as you were saying, that Harvard was holding the line. If these Ivy Leagues cannot fight back, the HBCUs and other institutions are going to be doomed. I also thought about one of my sheroes, Mary McLeod Bethune, who believed that education was the great equalizer, right? And so it makes sense that these systems are attacking education because they are so fundamentally important. Moving forward, Nekima, what do you think has been some of the impacts of these executive orders? What have you seen?
Well, some of the most immediate impacts are colleges and universities being under threat of losing their access to federal funding. Now, I mentioned earlier Columbia essentially being at risk of losing over 400 million in federal funding. Harvard being under threat of losing over $2 billion in federal funding. These are significant amounts of money to anyone, but let alone institutions of higher learning that not only focus on ensuring a high quality student body, high quality professors and staff members, beautification of their campuses, but arguably, equally or more importantly, is the research that comes out of some of these institutions, helping to find ways to cure serious illnesses, such as cancer, for example, or even illnesses that impact children. When the federal government decides to slash this funding, it can impact an institution's research budget, which means that an institution may have to decide on whether to continue to pursue areas of research that could literally save lives or bow down to the Trump administration's unreasonable demands. So those are some of the immediate impacts. And of course, we know that there are going to potentially be impacts to freedom of speech on campus, as well as academic freedom.
We've also seen examples of the Trump administration threatening companies for focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've seen you on the front lines, really hoping to lead those charges as well. So, can you tell us a little bit about what's been happening in that arena?
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up, Leslie. As you just mentioned, the Trump administration has been threatening corporations and forcing corporations to do away with programming and initiatives surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some companies have received pressure from attorneys general. Some have received letters from the Trump administration. And then you have other companies like Target, which is based in Minneapolis, which is where I live and where you went to law school. You have companies like Target who are proactively complying with the Trump administration. So on January 24th, Target Corporation put out a statement saying that they were going to essentially roll back their focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so that led to us on January 27th calling a national boycott against Target in front of its corporate headquarters in Minneapolis, and saying that that boycott is indefinite unless and until Target reverses its decision to roll back diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as you know, as a police accountability activist, this is also tied to our activism around justice for George Floyd. Because in the aftermath of George Floyd being killed by the Minneapolis Police Department, what we had was Target Corporation pledging $2 billion. And they pledged this $2 billion, saying that they were going to increase Black brands on their shelves, improve the Black customer shopping experience, increase their supplier diversity, and their hiring and promotion practices as it pertains to Black employees. So, as folks here on the front lines, we know that Target is fully aware of the oppression that our community has faced at the hands of the Minneapolis Police Department. Target also built a big part of its business model around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so, within 1 week of Donald Trump being in office, they cowered to him and made the decision to roll back diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as the public, we're saying absolutely not. The boycott has been extremely successful. There have been double-digit weeks of decreased foot traffic at Target. We've seen their stock prices decline significantly since the boycott began. And we have seen a lot of public outrage from people online saying that they will no longer shop at Target because of Target's betrayal and compliance with the Trump administration. And they're just one company amongst many that has decided to abandon some of their core principles around diversity and equity and inclusion under threats from Donald Trump, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah, Nekima, I'm so glad that you brought up police accountability. You know, you led the Minneapolis NAACP specifically during the time that Jamar Clark was murdered, an unarmed Black man in North Minneapolis, which would be 5 years before Brother George Floyd would be murdered, when I would be leading the Minneapolis NAACP. And I'm just wondering if you can speak to some of the recent actions by Trump's administration that threatens to further weaken police accountabilities in those measures.
Yes, I'll briefly touch on two things that have happened recently. So, as we know, that there is a program called the 1033 program. That program is very controversial because it allows the military to sell and transfer its surplus weapons and equipment to local police departments. Under the Obama administration, Barack Obama repealed various aspects of the 1033 program to make it more difficult for the military to transfer these high-powered weapons to local police departments. However, Donald Trump just recently repealed that ban on the 1033 program and opened it back up so that police departments can more easily access high-grade military weapons and equipment. That is very scary for many in our community, and as well as those of us who participate in nonviolent peaceful protests, knowing that police officers, instead of rolling up in a police car, can roll up in a police tank, which only escalates situations between police and community and causes a lot of fear, trauma, and additional harm. We have to use our voices and organize as people have been doing, whether it is boycotting that we've seen happen in Minneapolis and around the country, of different companies that are compliant with Donald Trump. People have been taking to the streets in protest to resist the fascism and the tyranny and authoritarianism that we're currently witnessing under the Trump administration. And people are making their voices heard through the use of social media, through showing up, through running for office, and ensuring that we will not be silent as these things are occurring.
Thank you, Nekima. Building on that, can you say more about what those of us who care about freedom and justice and resistance should be doing in the wake of these attacks on our civil rights and civil liberties?
Absolutely. One of the things we can do is file lawsuits. There are over 200 suits that have been filed against the Trump administration and counting, right? And some of those are folks who've gone to their local attorney general and said, hey, we don't want them to interfere with our public education system. We don't want them to apply pressure to these companies. So we have seen lawsuits being filed. We don't want the Trump administration to be able to deport people without due process, right? So filing lawsuits is one mechanism people can use. Getting organized and applying pressure to their elected officials at the local, state, and federal levels is also important. Not just relying on those elected officials to hold town hall meetings, but we, the people, holding town hall meetings. And at times inviting those elected officials and holding them accountable for using their voices to fight back against the tyranny of the Trump administration. And then I mentioned earlier, taking to the streets and protest, using social media and organizing however we can to resist what is going on.
Thank you to Nekima Levy Armstrong for shedding light on what is happening here and how it is impacting communities across the country. As I like to say, don't complain, activate. And the idea is that you don't have to be president in order to create change. It's everyday people who are transforming the world. In the words of Charles Hamilton Houston, as an attorney, we are either social engineers or parasites to society. Right. And so now is not the time to be silent. Now is the time to be courageous. To everyone who joined today, thank you for being a part of this important dialogue. The issues that we are exploring are complex and challenging, but by coming together in these spaces, we're taking meaningful steps towards progress. Remember, the work doesn't stop here. It continues with the actions that we take in our communities, our workplaces, and within the ABA. I encourage you all to stay engaged with the ABA's civil rights and social justice section and become a member if you aren't already. Visit our website, explore upcoming events, and consider joining one of our committees to help shape the work that we're doing. You can do so on our website. And once again, I want to remind you all, my name is Leslie E. Redmond, and this was an amazing opportunity. Thank you all for watching us. Keep fighting, and together we can and will make a difference. Grace and peace, everyone.